Welcome to the County Pulse podcast. And today we have with us a special guest, Jordan Amaskane from PrepRedzone, Illinois. And we thought we'd do a feature on games of the week, as well as doing some recruiting segments. And so Jordan's here with me today, and I'd like, maybe take a few minutes, Jordan, to talk about yourself, what you do at PrepRedzone, Illinois, and then let's get into the game of the week, which is going to be Peotone versus Herscher.
Yeah. So my name's Jordan Amaskane. I work for PrepRedzone. I mainly cover Illinois, so that's why it's PrepRedzone Illinois. Our whole focus is kind of giving high school kids exposure, whether they want to play JUCO, D3, D2, NAIA, D1. We want to cover all the kids, not just, the high prospect kids that are ranked and everything. So we feature kids in articles. We have showcases that we put together for kids to come out to. We have a prospect index, which is free. You just have to go to our website to fill it out. You just put your information into it, put your Hudl link in, Hudl film into it, and then coaches from JUCO up to the Power 5 school can contact you off of it.
And so in that role, do you have a chance to kind of go out, one, see athletes, and if you do, where would you see those athletes at? And then two, games that you're going to be going to, in particular this year, since the IHSA has kind of shortened the season because of the COVID restrictions. So talk a little bit, one, about, off-season summers when football's not playing, or even spring in normal years. And then this year, what you're going to be doing and how that's going to be beneficial to athletes here in this area.
Yeah, so mainly the way I see athletes is by going to showcases. That's a big way to kind of see a big group of athletes from, all over the state and the surrounding states. So you just get a big overview of them. Going to camps, going to team practices. Yesterday I was at St. Francis out in Wheaton for their practice, got to talk to their coaches and their players. Wrote an article about that, and then just stopping by the practices, showcases, going to games. For this season, because of COVID, it's only a 6-week schedule, so it's trying to fit as many teams in as I can. So for week 1, I'm going to Peotone. I know I'm going to the other 2 Peotone home games, going to an Iroquois West game on a Saturday, going to Bradley Bourbonnais versus Carl Sandburg. I think it's their last game of the season. I'm still trying to, figure out Marian Catholic versus Crete Moni for next week. What else is there? There's Lockport versus Lincoln Way East, Lamont versus TF North. And those are all the games for right now. I might try and squeeze in 1 or 2 more Saturday games if I can. Like if I can find one that's, close-ish, like an hour or so away from me. But right now, that's all I really have at the moment.
And so in your role of a scout here in Illinois, you guys have just about every state covered. Is that correct? When it comes to recruitment, and you're not just even though we're going to be focusing a lot on football, you're not just a football. PrepRedzone just isn't for football. It's a kind of a multi-athlete when it comes to, or multi-sport, I should say, when it comes to recruiting athletes. So can you touch a little bit on the, I think it's the Illinois Prep Hoops side, even though you're not in that, but talk a little bit about what their role is too.
So we have one for boys and girls basketball and for boys and girls volleyball. So we have PrepRedzone for football, Prep Hoops for basketball, and then Prep Dig for the volleyball. And they do the exact same thing that we do for football, except instead of for football recruiting, it's for volleyball recruiting and basketball recruiting.
And so to get that, so PrepRedzone, right, must be indicative of the red zone in football. And so it's PrepRedzone IL, correct?
For Illinois.
And then Prep Hoops, is it Prep Hoops IL for Illinois?
Yeah.
Okay, and then talk a little bit about Dig. I'm not familiar with the volleyball, but it's something I think we should let people know. So if they're watching, they have a young woman in volleyball, that may be someplace they want to go to increase college coaches' awareness.
Yeah, so that would also just be at Prep Dig, Illinois. Um, I think that basketball and volleyball has the prospect index that football has. I'm not 100% sure on that, so I have to go double check and I can get back to you on it. But like this, like for, especially for volleyball, they do the same thing that I do. Like they'll go out to the games, to scout people, they can go to team practices, go to camps, go to showcases, just, the same exact thing, just for a different sport.
Yeah. And so, in particular, as we relate to football, um, a lot of what's focused from your perspective, if you can't see the athlete, right, you use different methods, right? You go to a camp to see that particular athlete or a multitude of athletes, right? The other way is through Hudl, right? And so
Yeah.
Hudl is set up. Um, Most people will know this as watching this, but I think it's important to talk about. It's set up that high schools, most high schools, if not all high schools, have it. They upload the game footage to there, or even practice footages, and they take that and they'll chop that up on individual plays. So you can then take it as a player, you can look at it, and you can identify these plays that in that particular game you thought were beneficial, and you can make a highlight tape out of that. So a college coach doesn't say, "Well, I've got to go through 2 hours of a game video." I'm going to be able to go to Jordan's uh, Hudl page, and I'm going to be able to look at Jordan and say, "Okay, he's got a minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, whatever it may be, highlight." And he can see those, and those are typically, you try to structure those, if I'm correct, from our earlier conversations, to put your good plays up front, right? So if you're scoring a touchdown, you get a sack, an interception, you make a play that by far is one of your best plays, they should be up front. And that's kind of what you use too, right? Is to be able to look at that and evaluate that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So so when it's the off season, since COVID, it's the first time that the, upper underclassmen are being able to play now to get their junior film and stuff, and the seniors are able to get their senior film out. Been watching a lot of Hudl film from the previous season, and like the most important thing to do is have kind of your most like eye-popping plays in that first like 20, 30 seconds of the film. Like for myself, I watch the whole entire thing, but for college coaches, they get thousands of films sent to them, all like, probably every day, I assume, if they're at like the Division One level. So they only have about 20, 30 seconds of watching a film, and if they're not interested, they're just going to go to the next person. So I can't stress it enough to put your best plays first. So then they're watching like, oh, I want to know more about this person. This really caught my attention. I wonder what else they're going to do in this highlight type of thing.
Yeah, and I know we're going to be talking in a minute about the game of the week, but I find the recruiting process very fascinating, and misunderstood, from a sense of people aren't stupid when it comes to it. They don't have inability to be able to understand it. They just don't have that connection to the recruiting. And I think that's what we're talking about doing as we move along for everybody. Is what we're going to do is we're going to take each step through that recruiting process. And we're going to do it one from how you're going to go from a freshman to a sophomore to a junior to a senior, and how you're going to be able to do that and the components you need within that, right? So right now, the big push is Twitter, right? And trying to use it on that, and then you can link in your Hudl account and you work from there. So we're going to get into that as the weeks go on. So not only do parents understand it, but kids in particular understand what they've got to do. And can you talk a little bit about the importance of not just the players, right, doing this, but having parents engaged in that process, and why do you think that's important?
Yeah. So for both of them, it's important because, it'll help the athlete get their name out there, help college coaches find them easier. So like for myself, and other people, like doing PrepRedzone, whenever we write articles and stuff, we try to tag their Twitter into it and their highlight film. So if a coach is going to click on it, they can easily like have access to their highlights and to their Twitter off of the article instead of having to search it up. So that's kind of important. And also was for the parents, especially, to be involved in this, is they'll be able to kind of contact the other coaches, like sending film to them and sending film to, recruiters and stuff if their child doesn't have the time to do so. And then from there, have the coach contact the child, like contact the child off of like the Twitter account that their parents sent them. And also kind of guiding the child through the process, because if you do it by yourself, it can be overwhelming if you necessarily don't know the ins and out of it. But once you kind of understand how to do it and know the process of how to go about it, it is fairly simple.
Well, and the other thing we're talking about doing is not just doing segments, and you're going to have a kind of an ebook that's going to be laid out, correct? That's going to kind of help people walk through that. That's going to be able to say this is what you need to do. But we're also going to then try to incorporate that into videos. And then what we've also got planned for this year is as we get a better handle, hopefully, on the COVID issue, we can then have clinics where we can bring parents and players in and go through this stuff. And those are going to be free. All this process that we're doing, right, is free. So your process that you go through of writing this game of the week that we're going to talk about here in a second, that's all free. No one's, it's not like someone's coming to the school and saying, hey, if you sign up for $1,000 package, you get this, $2,000, $3,000. What we're doing is, this is important for the athletes. The only component that for you is on PrepRedzone is to be able to, if you want to view the articles, see the articles, kind of keep up with what the latest happenings are in high school football, in particular here in Illinois, but in any state, right? Each state's got their own PrepRedzone. As you sign up, I think it's $14.99 a month, something like that, and then you can get that. But as far as the recruitment process, as far as coming out to see if you've got a son that's playing football and Jordan's there and Jordan notices him, Jordan more than likely is going to see him if he's the type of player that Jordan wants to scout, or if he's got some talent, he's going to scout that kid and you're going to write an article, right? And that costs nothing, right? Yeah. So I think we're going to transition now into the game of the week. We're going to talk a little bit about Peotone and Herscher. And for us, we know where Peotone and Herscher are, but for people that maybe aren't familiar with the area, maybe a little bit farther north, farther south, Herscher is located in the western part of Kankakee County. It's west of Kankakee, the city of Kankakee. And then Peotone is north, just, I think, on the inner portion of the southern border for Will County. And those two teams are going to lock horns Friday night. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so from your perspective, talk a little bit about what you expect to see, if there's anything that you see as a game changer or someone you see as a game changer, and what people should be prepared for if they're either going to the game or if the game is televised, which I don't know if it is, but hopefully it is. And maybe give your insight on what you think is going to happen this week.
Yeah. So we could just start off with like the offense, defense, and kind of like points to win. So with the offense for Peotone, they have Ben Balmer that's returning. He's their senior running back. Last season, he only played like 4 or 5 games and rushed for over 600 yards in just that little amount of games. So having him back is going to be a big plus for them. And they also have a sophomore running back in Dawson Piper who's playing up on varsity. So they have 2 power backs in their wing T formation, which is going to be, kind of a plus for them. And then they also have Tristan Waglars, which is a transfer quarterback from Lincoln White East. Now, he brings a new dimension to the team because he's able to, pass the ball and run kind of a spread offense. So, I kind of feel like that Peotone's going to be focused on running their wing T because that's their bread and butter. But with, Tristan coming in, they might look to have more of a passing attack than the previous years before. For Herscher, they have Cody Lunsford. He was a sophomore running back last season and played up on varsity. And, he made plays here and there and, kind of had a pretty good season. So having him back, he's a dominant playmaker on offense. He can also line up in the slot receiver in their spread offense, catch the ball, turn upfield, make plays, turn a 5-yard, hitch or, three-step slant to a touchdown type of playmaker ability. And they also have Adam Schott at receiver. So those are kind of going to be the 2 big names on offense for their team. Herscher does run a spread offense, so they, focus on having a vertical attack and stretching the field that way. So then it'll open up their running game. So, and moving on to their defense for Peotone, it's going to be all about their defensive ends, as their forefront for their defense. They run a 3-5 defense. So they have Tyler Hendricker, who's going to be a big name to know for Peotone this season and next season. And they have a younger kid coming on, Alex Cardenas. He is a sophomore, but don't be surprised by the end of this season if he's going to start getting those college offers, college interest, because he's just that dominant of a player on JV from last season. Peotone can turn their 3-5 into a 3-4 or even a 5-3, just depending on where they want to move their outside linebacker and just depending on the game situation. Either way, their defense, like that they have to focus on, is stopping Cody Lunsford. If they can limit him to the big plays and just let their other players beat them, they have a bigger chance of winning the game. For Herscher, they run a 3-4, which they can turn to a 5-2, just walking up their outside linebackers. Names to keep an eye on for their defense is Talon Jones at outside linebacker, and for DB, Cody Lunsford. Both of these players, they can, make a play in an instant. They can fly to the ball, fill the hole, and run support. And this is going to, be a very heavily focused item versus Peotone, because Peotone is a run-heavy offense. So for the key points that are in for Peotone, it's really just going to stick to their bread and butter in the running game. They have the carousel of running backs with Ballmer. They have Piper. They have, Ryan Moe's also in the mix. They have a few other guys as well that can get the ball and, make plays here and there in the running game. For defense, the whole focus is Cody Lunsford. If they limit him to the big plays, like I said, they have a very high chance of winning the game. For Herscher, it's going to be to, continue with their vertical attack on offense and stretch the field, because Lunsford's using both the passing and running attack. So getting him available, getting him looks in both of those aspects of the game is going to be big for them. And another thing is that, Peotone's defense, like their defensive line, is very aggressive. So I wouldn't be surprised if Herscher decides to run some halfback draws or screen plays to kind of keep them on their toes and get those big plays, because the D line will rush upfield, and then it'll just be a big play that happens 1 or 2 times in the game. If Herscher can stop Ballmer and Piper on defense, then they have a very high chance of winning, because if they stop those 2 guys, it'll force Peotone to go more into a passing attack, which, traditionally they haven't done in the past few years. So that's kind of where I feel like Herscher would want Peotone to be, is using the passing attack. The only thing is that with Tristan in there, it makes it might make it counterproductive, because Tristan is a pretty good quarterback and he can get it done with his feet as well. So it's kind of like a 50-50. Do you want the running backs to beat you, or do you want to give it to the new quarterback and see what he can do? Overall, I think it's going to be a close game. Both teams have talent on both sides of the ball. What's going to be interesting to see is kind of which team loses their legs in the second half of the game, because it's been such a long time since they played football, and getting into football shape is kind of, it takes a little while to get into that, So that's kind of the big thing about it. I do think that, whoever is able to outlast the other team with their legs and win the turnover advantage is going to win the game. My prediction is that Peotone wins 28-24, but it's not going to be kind of I just, scored all these points, I'm winning. It's going to be a very hard-fought game for the whole entire time.
And you see that potentially, even though you're predicting Peotone to win, that potentially could just be flipped the other way if you're not able to control that back out of Herscher, right?
Yeah.
Now, is Herscher more of a kind of a straightforward smash mouth? Their backs go to the outside. Do you have any idea on there's a lot of setups that are going to the outside, depending on the back speed and stuff. There's other ones, you mentioned them earlier, Iroquois West, which has a new coach in Coach Teal, and they're probably going to be a tough smash mouth kind of team. And I think they've struggled over the last couple of years, but with him coming back, being a former state champion from Iroquois West, they run it. I think they're going to run it up the middle. Because they got some big boys up there. So how do you see Herscher on their run game? Do you see this back coming out and and doing maybe smash mouth? Are they big enough in the front line to be able to handle that, or is it going to be more, you think, of an outside kind of game?
So from what I saw, it seems like they're gonna run kind of to the inside. Except from what I see is that Lunsford always has the ability to bounce the play outside and turn the corner. So it might be like an inside run, but then say like the holes get filled, he'll just bounce it outside for probably like a 15, 20 or touchdown. He just has that ability. So I'd say an inside running type of team. However, he's able to bounce it outside as well. So it's kind of like a mix of the two.
Well, and one of the reasons I'm asking that is because they've got, you mentioned, is the defensive end at Peotone. Tyler, I don't know,
Hendricker.
Hendricker. And we followed him, he's followed us, and he's had some pretty decent interest from different schools. I haven't had the opportunity to see him, but it would appear to me that he could be a fairly dominant presence on the outside, depending on if he's on strong side or weak side.
Yeah.
And they obviously are probably aware of that. They've scouted it, so they may, if they have to run to the outside, they may, they're going to probably run away from him. I don't know who the other defensive end is, but certainly his name came to mind for me because I've seen him, and it ought to be an interesting matchup this weekend. And so that game's at Peotone, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And what time does that game kick off?
Let's see.
One of the reasons I ask is because we thought we'd be an 8 o'clock start here at Bradley. We're actually going to be a 6:30, I think, kickoff. So it makes it a little bit tougher, and our schedule's kind of moved. And I think some of these folks are having a tough time. Some of these teams are having a tough time getting a full complement of teams to play. So some of the teams you look at, they'll be, they'll have a full complement of 6 games. Others will have 5, and then I've seen some that are still asking for games, even coming into this first weekend, which is going to be tomorrow and Saturday. So I was just wondering because I think as people get into this, and I think there's probably some high school football geeks, I guess you would say, that really want to follow this. I think there's an opportunity to if you're not going to a game in your area, you can pick up some of these games on YouTube. And then I know on some of the games, they're not on YouTube, but they're going to be on a paid service, which I forget what the name of it is, NCSA or something to that effect. But that may be something that people will look at. So I didn't know if you had the time. If you don't, that's fine. We'll put it up and once we're done. But
It starts at 6 p.m.
6 p.m. Okay, so that's what we were originally going to have at Bradley, was 6 p.m. It got moved back to, I believe, 6:30. And I think the restrictions are on attendance is 20% of capacity for all the places. So that depends on how big your facility is, how many people you can hold, and then of course you take the 20% of that. And then I think a lot of schools, I know at BBCHS, they're giving out X amount of tickets per player to give to family members, right? And then on ours, at least in our conference, it appears to be we'll be allowed to go to visiting games, and I think we'll have 4 tickets each parent, so you can bring your wife and or you can bring your husband or whatever. You bring your spouse and a couple other people, or maybe the player's siblings or whatever. So it looks like it's going to be a chilly night Friday. Do you think that's going to have any impact on? I know you mentioned earlier, and I think that's a concern, and we've talked about off the air, is the concern of these kids going into football with having such a short ramp-up period. We're concerned about, at least I'm concerned about, the number of injuries we're going to have because this is another side effect of COVID. There's been more stationary activity than there has been playing sports and stuff. So that's a concern, and that may be a concern with it being a little bit colder. Things are going to tighten up on you a little bit quicker, but certainly how much you have in a gas tank based off of stamina is going to be a key too.
Yeah. And then another big thing is going to see kind of depending on like if it rains or not, which team is able to run the ball better than the other one, because passing the ball in the rain is very difficult to do.
Yeah, and I think the last I checked, I think the weather is it's going to be cold. It's going to be high of 42 and real feel 38. I think tomorrow's a high, at least the last time I checked. But that real feel is going to go down as well as the temperature can go down around game time. But it doesn't look like at this point. It looks like a very low chance, about a 1% of rain. So keep your fingers crossed, because you're going to be out there, and so are the fans. So what are you looking at next week, Jordan?
So next week I'm still working on getting it confirmed, but I am trying to go to Marian Catholic versus Cremoni.
Okay. And is that at Marian Catholic, or is that at Cremoni?
Yeah, it's at Marian Catholic.
Okay. Yeah, there's some other big games going on, and I've mentioned those both in our Twitter account at the County Pulse Podcast. Kankakee's playing Sacred Heart Griffith out of Springfield, which is a historic program in Illinois. BBCHS can be playing Lincoln Way Central. They're not the big dogs as Bolingbrook and Lincoln Way East seem to be year after year. And I'm not for sure, maybe you know this, I don't know who Bishop Mack is playing this week, but that's another team that you've really got to keep an eye on as you go along, because I know preseason prior to the September kind of shutdown of football, they were up there ranked, and I think they're still mentioned as a powerhouse in their division. So whoever they're playing, we will, I encourage people, to either get online, or if you think you can't make it out, is check these kids out online. And then we'll check back in next week, Jordan, on the pregame, and maybe we'll have a post-game wrap-up, and you can take some notes on how you've seen things turned out, and we're going to figure out if your score is working out or whether it went the other way. So we hope them. I'm sure you're the same as we hope both of those teams are successful to whatever extent, and they can stay away from the injuries. So this is what we're going to be doing each week. We're going to continue to do this as we go along. Jordan's been kind enough and patient enough with me getting through all the things I've got to get through, the technical issues as well as the health issues. But we'll be checking in next week, and maybe we'll do a wrap-up first part of next week with this game, and then we'll also do kind of a preview of your game coming up. And we're hoping as this expands, we'll get some players on. Part of that is going to be a separate component where we're going to have players come on, talk about 10 to 15 minutes about themselves, and we may take the time to review their Hudl highlights and take a look at that and see what we see and what Jordan sees from his perspective as the PrepRedzone Illinois scout. But we think it's important to get those players directly on here, let them talk for themselves, and get that out to college coaches and stuff. So with that, Jordan, I appreciate it. Get some rest, dress warm tomorrow, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sure.